Hello students! Now that you have finished your 4 article reviews, we would like to move you one step ahead, writing the literature review. A literature review is an organized document where you assemble the data you have gathered from the 4 articles in a special way, always around your research question. This document is made of sections that are a cover page, an outline, an introduction, a methodology, results, a discussion, and references. Let us start with the cover page. It must include the name of the university, the department, the title of your literature review, including the 2 variables and the relationship between them, the phrase literature review submitted by, your names and IDs in addition to your group, the phrase supervised by, followed by the name of your teacher, and finally the month and year. Make sure that all the text is centered, double-spaced, and following the same font size as shown here. Now let us move to the outline. The first section is entitled Introduction. Of course, you have to indent and write the element in a phrase form. You will include in this section the problem and its theoretical background. For instance, here the problem is students' academic achievement in relation to class size. Note that you must cite from the studies, otherwise you will get a 0 for this section. Other elements to be included are the purpose and research question, as well as the definitions of the 2 variables. The second section is the methodology. It includes the keywords that guided your research, that is to say, the 2 variables, the years covered, the sources, as well as the inclusion and exclusion. Of course, the information required here is the one you have in your group narrowing down. The third section is that of results, and it includes the grouping according to results or otherwise according to similarities and differences across the 4 studies. For example, here, studies have been grouped according to the size of the samples. So we have small sample size studies, large sample size studies, and they are specified in the 2 other subparts of this section. Note please that you have to use in-text citation. This will be discussed later on in detail. The 4th section is that of the discussion part, and it should include an overview of the results in relation to the research question, differences across the 4 studies in terms of sample size, characteristics, location, and so on, instruments, and procedure. This section also includes the interpretation of the results and the recommendations for future research. Now that you are finished with the outline, let us move to the body. Start writing the introduction. The introduction is made of 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph starts by giving background information on the topic, then it discusses the problem in relation to the 2 variables in question. Please do not mention any results and do not forget in-text citation. Then, use the most shared significance or gap among the 4 studies. The second paragraph includes the purpose and research question of the whole literature review and not the purposes and questions of each of the 4 studies. The third paragraph includes the operational definition of each of the 2 variables in each of the 4 studies. If an operational definition is shared by 2 studies or more, combine them in the in-text citation. Now, let us see the example from the sample here. So, you have here the first paragraph that includes the background for academic achievement, which is education. Education then is discussed in terms of factors that influence achievement. Then, we lead the discussion towards class size, our independent variable. The second part in blue is a shared significance or gap. Of course, do not forget to use in-text citation. Now, you have the second paragraph, which is made of the purpose and research question. Do not forget to include in both of them the variables and their relationship. Here comes the third paragraph, which is made of 2 parts in 2 different colors. The first part includes the operational definitions of the independent variables all together with its in-text citation. The second part includes the operational definitions of the dependent variable, all together with its in-text citation as well. So you can see if operational definitions are shared, we combine them in the in-text citation. In order to write this section, you will need the group narrowing down. Now, the methodology. In order to write this section, you will need the group narrowing down. This section consists of 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph includes the variables that guided your research, the databases used to get the results, the years covered, the delimiters used to narrow down your search, and the total number of results. You can get this info from the search history. The second paragraph includes the total number of studies, the number of studies excluded because of being secondary, and the number of studies excluded because of being primarily irrelevant. For those that are primarily irrelevant, state the reasons for exclusion. The third paragraph includes 4 primary relevant studies and their citations. In case you have only 3 studies from the narrowing down and 1 supplementary, mention the source of the supplementary study, for example, Google Scholar. Please note that the citation should only include the family names of the authors, comma, and the year of publication. No initial names, please. Here is an example of how the methodology should be written. The results section consists of 5 paragraphs, 1 paragraph for grouping and 1 paragraph for each study. In order to interpret the results, we have to group the studies. The studies should be grouped according to results. However, this is possible if the studies are different. If they're similar, we have to find another way to group them. We can go for the sample age, location, size, and so on, instruments like questionnaire, interviews, and so on, or procedures like pre-post, longitudinal, and cross-sectional. For example, as you see here, the 4 studies included in this literature review are grouped according to the number of students used as a sample. The first group contains a small sample of students less than 600, and the other one is a large sample, more than 3,000 students. This was because the results of the 4 studies were similar. Make sure you include the citation of each group and order them from the most recent to the least. For example, this group includes 2 studies, Ata, Jamil, Ayaz, Shah, and Shah, 2011, semicolon, Fenollar, Roman, and Cuestas, 2007. Then, you have 4 paragraphs, a paragraph about each study. You summarize aim, research questions, hypotheses, sample, instruments, procedures, results, and practical implications. Make sure you include citation for each study, order them according to grouping, and use linking devices. For example, you say, the first study belonging to the first group and conducted by Ata, Jamil, Ayaz, Shah, and Shah, 2011, aimed at. The second study belonging to the first group and conducted by Fenollar, Roman, and Cuestas, 2007, aimed at. Between the 2 groups, there should be a transition sentence that signals your move from the first group to the second group. For example, this is what's being stated in our sample literature review. After having a look at the studies with small samples belonging to the first group, we will look at the studies with larger samples belonging to the second group. Then, you state the studies of the second group. The discussion section is divided into 4 paragraphs, and it's dedicated to analyzing the results of the 4 studies, whether similar or different, in relation to the examined research question in the literature review. Make sure each paragraph starts with a topic sentence clarifying what this paragraph presents. The first paragraph is an overview of results of the examined research question. The second paragraph represents the differences across the 4 studies. The third paragraph presents the interpretation of results, and the last paragraph presents your recommendations for future research. As for what you write exactly in each paragraph, I will explain now. The first paragraph represents an overview of the results of the examined research question. It starts with a topic sentence referring to the research question at hand and whether the results of this question in the 4 studies were similar or different. This sentence is followed by a brief statement of the results of each study without p-values. Whenever you refer to a particular study, you have to cite. In the second paragraph, we examine the differences in terms of sample, instruments, and procedures across the 4 studies. In this paragraph, you need to examine each point of difference separately across the 4 studies. Make sure to include in-text citation whenever you refer to any study. Each aspect of difference in the sample should be separately discussed. For example, final sample size discussed across the 4 studies, sample location, age, gender, each point to be discussed separately and looked at in each of the 4 studies. You need to synthesize information where it applies. The difference in the instruments measuring the 2 variables is in terms of type, for example, interviews, questionnaires, tests, and so on. As for the procedures, for example, you need to examine each of the following aspects, if present, separately across the 4 studies. Procedure type, for example, longitudinal, cross-sectional, duration, grouping of sample, number of sessions of an intervention. Do not forget to include the in-text citation for each study referred to in this paragraph. In an attempt to interpret the results in the third paragraph, the second paragraph can be used to explain the reasons for similarities or differences in the results. It presents an interpretation of the results of the examined research question. In case the results of the 4 studies in relation to the question are similar, you would comment on the limited generalizability of the results. For example, they could be limited to a certain age group, or a certain gender, or a certain location. The differences examined in paragraph 2 will help you find this interpretation. In case the results were conflicting, you need to explain the reason for difference across the 4 studies. What do you believe might have caused this difference? The differences examined in paragraph 2 will help you find this reason. The last paragraph of the discussion section represents your recommendations for future research, examining this relationship in the question. You need to present 2 points of recommendation. Each point needs to be specific, and you need to comment on the rationale behind this recommendation or why you believe this is a significant point. Your point of recommendation needs to be an aspect that was missing in the 4 studies. As for the reference list, in your references, you need to include all the sources used to write this literature review. This includes citation for the 4 studies and any extra sources used to write the introduction section. For each source citation, you need to write the family names of the authors, followed by commas and the initials of their first names separated by stops. Authors are separated by commas except for the last name, which is preceded by and or ampersand. Then comes the year of publication in brackets. Then the title, and capitalize only the first letter of the first word. Then write the journal name in italics and capitalize first letters of all content words. Then a comma, then the volume without writing the word volume, followed by edition or issue in brackets if mentioned. Then the page numbers, followed by a full stop. Then retrieved from EPNet and specify the date you printed it. Make sure to arrange the sources alphabetically according to the last names of the researchers at the beginning of each source citation, and make sure to indent each reference.